Alex was used to the quiet life. Living alone in a small cabin in the forest gave him a sense of peace he never found in the bustling city. The only sounds he heard most days were the wind rustling through the trees and the occasional animal scurrying through the underbrush. His life was simple. He worked, read, and spent time fixing things around his cabin. He liked it that way. No distractions, no drama. Just the way he preferred it. That evening, as the sky began to turn pink with the setting sun, Alex was sitting by the fire, reading his favorite book. He had just finished a long day of chopping wood and was looking forward to a quiet night. But then, a strange noise interrupted his thoughts. It was faint at first, a sound that could have been mistaken for the wind, but it was too rhythmic, too consistent to be anything natural. Alex stood up, setting his book aside, and moved toward the window. He peered through the glass into the darkening forest, but saw nothing. His instincts told him something was off. Suddenly, there was a loud thud against the cabin door, followed by another noise, a weak, desperate gasp. His heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, Alex grabbed a flashlight and rushed to the door. He hesitated for a second, wondering what could be out there. But his curiosity and the sense of urgency he felt pushed him to act. He opened the door carefully, shining the flashlight into the night. His breath caught in his throat when he saw her, a woman lying on the ground just outside his cabin. She looked injured, her body pale and covered in bruises. Her clothes were torn, and there was blood on her face and arms. She was breathing, but barely, her eyes fluttering as if she was about to pass out. Alex's first instinct was to turn away, to lock the door and pretend he didn't see anything. But then something stopped him. The woman needed help. It didn't matter who she was or where she came from, he couldn't just leave her to die. He knelt down beside her, his flashlight casting a faint glow on her delicate features. Her skin was a strange color, almost a light shade of blue, and her ears were shaped unlike anything he had ever seen. She wasn't human. But Alex didn't care about that. She was hurt, and he had to help her. "Hey, can you hear me?" Alex asked, his voice gentle but urgent. She didn't respond, her eyes half open but unseeing. He could feel the cold creeping into his bones as the wind picked up around them. He couldn't leave her out here. He quickly scooped her up in his arms, being careful not to hurt her further, and carried her into the cabin. The moment he crossed the threshold, he laid her on the couch, trying to make her as comfortable as possible. His mind raced as he moved to the kitchen, grabbing a towel and some clean water. He wiped away the blood from her face and arms, then tried to assess her injuries. There were cuts and bruises all over her body and a deep gash on her leg that was still bleeding. Alex didn't have medical supplies, but he was resourceful. He grabbed a cloth and tied it around her leg to slow the bleeding, hoping it would be enough. The woman stirred slightly and Alex froze, his eyes wide with hope. She wasn't gone yet. He had a chance to save her. He sat beside her, watching, her face closely. She was still breathing, though her breaths were shallow. He had to do something. Alex knew that he couldn't keep her here forever. If she wasn't from this planet, there was no telling who might come looking for her. But, for now, he had to focus on keeping her alive. The minutes felt like hours as Alex kept vigil over her. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't a doctor. He had no experience with alien species. But all he could do was try his best. After what felt like an eternity, the woman finally opened her eyes. She blinked a few times, her gaze unfocused, before looking up at Alex. He could see the confusion in her eyes, but also a flicker of something. Relief, maybe? She wasn't afraid, but she was clearly disoriented. "Hey, you're safe now," Alex said softly. "I'm going to help you. Just rest, okay?" The alien woman's lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she lifted a hand weakly, pointing toward the door. Alex frowned, unsure of what she meant. He glanced at the door, then back at her. "You're looking for someone?" he asked, his voice low and she hesitated, then looked at him with a look of gratitude. She didn't argue, though she seemed eager to speak. Alex could see it in the way she fidgeted with her hands, trying to find the right words. Finally, after a few moments, she spoke again, this time in more broken English. I am from far away, she said, her voice shaky, as if speaking in a foreign language was difficult. My ship, it was attacked. I barely escaped. Alex leaned in closer, eager to understand her story. What happened? He asked, his voice gentle. The alien woman took a deep breath, her eyes distant as though recalling painful memories. I am part of an expedition. We were exploring another planet, but we were attacked by others, hostile forces. They destroyed our ship. I was the only one who survived. She paused, her chest rising and falling as if the memory weighed heavily on her. I ran. They chased me. I couldn't stay on the ship. I had to hide. She looked, down at her hands, trembling slightly. Alex felt a pang of sympathy for her. She had been through something terrible, something he couldn't even begin to imagine. Her isolation, her fear, it all made sense now. She wasn't just an alien. She was a survivor, and Alex's small cabin had become her refuge. I'm sorry, Alex said softly, his heart going out to her. You don't deserve this. She met his gaze again, her eyes filled with a deep sadness, but also a flicker of hope. Thank you for helping me, she whispered. I have nowhere else to go. I need to keep hiding, but I don't know for how long. Alex nodded, his thoughts racing. He couldn't let her go, not in her current state. But what if whoever was chasing her came after him next? He had no way of knowing if they would stop at his cabin. He didn't even know who they were or how dangerous they might be. He had to make a decision. Should he send her away, protect himself, and forget about everything that had happened? Or should he stand by her, help her, and face whatever danger came their way together? Before Alex could voice his concerns, the alien woman continued. I have to keep running, she said, her voice filled with uncertainty. But I don't know where to go, my people. I don't know if they're still alive. I'm alone. Alex sat down beside her, thinking for a moment. He didn't have the answers, but there was one thing he knew for sure. He couldn't just let her leave. Not when she had no other options. You're not alone, Alex said firmly, looking her in the eyes. You don't have to run anymore. You're safe here, at least for now. The alien woman looked at him, her expression softening. She seemed to understand the sincerity in his words. For a brief moment, she let her guard down, allowing herself to relax. There was something in her eyes, a silent thanks for his kindness. Alex felt the weight of the situation growing heavier, but he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. He didn't know what would happen next or what dangers lay ahead, but for now he had made his choice. He would help her, protect her, and maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to stop the danger that was chasing her. The night stretched on, and as the storm raged outside, Alex and the alien woman sat in silence, a fragile but growing bond forming between them. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring, but at least for this moment they had each other. The following days were filled with quiet moments, but an unease lingered in the air. Alex had taken it upon himself to care for the injured alien, woman whom he had come to think of as Mira. She seemed to trust him even though she spoke little. Her progress was slow, but every day she seemed to grow stronger, and Alex felt a growing sense of responsibility for her well-being. It had been 3 days since she arrived at his cabin, and in that time, Alex had learned little about where she was from other than that her home was far away across the stars. Mira's ship had been destroyed and she had barely escaped with her life. Her pursuers, she had explained in bits and pieces, were still after her. But as much as she tried to explain, there were still more questions than answers. Despite the calm that had descended on the cabin, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Mira would often look toward the window with a wary expression as though expecting something or someone dangerous to appear. Alex had tried to reassure her that they were safe, but he wasn't entirely convinced himself. The forest outside, usually a peaceful place, now felt unnervingly quiet, as if holding its breath. One evening, as Alex was preparing a meal, Mira, stood by the window, her sharp eyes scanning the darkening landscape. Alex glanced at her, noticing the tension in her posture. Her ears were slightly pointed, as they always were, but now they seemed to be alert, like the rest of her body. She looked at him then, her gaze intense. "I think they're coming," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. Alex froze, the knife in his hand halting its motion. "Who's coming?" he asked, his voice tightening with anxiety. Mira didn't answer right away. She turned back toward the window, her gaze focused on something Alex couldn't see. "They found me. I can feel them," she said, her voice filled with a mix of fear and determination. "They won't stop until they have me, or until I'm dead." Alex's heart raced. He knew she had been pursued, but hearing her say it out loud made it feel more real. The danger was no longer something distant, it was here. The fear in Mira's eye. It was enough to make Alex's blood run cold. "Are they close?" Alex asked, his voice shaky. She nodded. "Very close." Before Alex could respond, a low, rumbling sound echoed from the woods. It was distant at first, but it grew louder, the sound of engines, possibly from ships. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He moved toward the door, peering through the small crack in the wooden frame. Outside, the world seemed still, but he could hear it. Engines, heavy and mechanical, cutting through the quiet night. "They're here," Mira said softly, her face pale. "They won't stop. They'll search every inch of this place until they find me." Alex's mind raced. He hadn't been prepared for this. He hadn't thought the pursuit would reach this far. He glanced at Mira, his thoughts a blur. "We need to leave. Now." Mira shook her head. "It's too late. They will come. There's nowhere to hide. You're not safe here with me." Alex's heart clenched. He wasn't going to abandon her. He couldn't. "We'll figure something out," he said, his voice firm. "They won't get you. I won't let them." Mira hesitated, looking down at her hands. "You don't understand. You can't protect me from them. They're not like you. They're powerful." Alex didn't care how powerful they were. He wasn't going to leave her to face them alone. "I'll fight if I have to. But I'm not leaving you." Mira looked at him, her expression softening for a moment. "You're brave, human, but you don't have the power to stop them. I've seen what they can do." Alex's mind whirled with thoughts of escape. There had to be a way. The cabin was small, but he knew the forest. He could move through it quickly if they left now, maybe get to a nearby town. He could try to get help. But there was something else. Mira. She wasn't just an innocent bystander. She was something more. He could feel it in the way she moved, in the way she carried herself, like there was more to her than met the eye. The way her eyes glowed faintly in the dark when she was deep in thought. She wasn't like any human he had ever met. "Mira," Alex said quietly, turning to face her. "We need to leave now. If they're close, we don't have time to waste. We'll figure this out together. You're not alone." Mira's gaze softened, but she didn't speak. She stood there for a moment, her eyes meeting his. There was an intensity to her expression, a mixture of gratitude and something else. Regret, maybe. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "But you need to listen to me. They will find us. And if they do, we won't make it out alive." Alex gritted his teeth, his resolve hardening. "Then we fight. We make them regret ever coming after you." The sound of the engines grew louder, and Alex could feel the pressure building. They had no time to waste. The danger was here, and it was coming for them. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Alex grabbed his coat and turned to Mira, his eyes filled with determination. "Let's go," he said. "We're not running away. We're going, to make sure they don't get what they came for." Mira met his gaze, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You're more than just a human," she said quietly. The morning after Mira's warning, the world outside seemed different. The air was still, the forest silent as if holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The storm had passed. But the tension remained thick between Alex and Mira. He could feel it in every glance she shot toward the door, in the way she paced restlessly around the cabin. She was ready to leave, and Alex could see the fear in her eyes, a fear that mirrored his own. Alex knew they couldn't stay in the cabin much longer. The sounds of the engines from the previous night had been a warning, and they were getting closer. Whoever was hunting Mira wasn't going to stop until they found her. He had to act fast. After a quiet breakfast, Alex gathered what little they had: food, water, and a few personal items, anything that could help them survive. Mira stood silently beside him, watching as he moved around the cabin, preparing for their departure. He could feel her eyes on him, and for the first time, he realized just how much he had grown to trust her. "You don't have to come with me," Alex said suddenly, his voice quieter than he intended. "I can get you to safety. I'll find a way to protect you, but you don't have to keep putting yourself at risk for me." Mira looked at him, her face unreadable. She shook her head, stepping closer. "I trust you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I don't have anyone else. Not anymore." Alex's heart tightened at the words. He had never expected to become so involved in someone else's fight, especially not with an alien woman who had appeared out of nowhere. But there was something in her eyes, something that made him feel like he couldn't walk away. "All right," he said, nodding. "We'll leave, but we need to move quickly." Together they headed into the forest. Mira followed Alex as they carefully made their way through the trees, trying to avoid any open spaces where they might be spotted. Alex had spent years living in the woods, and he knew the land well, but this time it felt different. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. The fear that someone was hunting them, hunting her, made every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves feel like a threat. Mira kept pace with him, her eyes scanning the surroundings as though every shadow might hide an enemy. She seemed perfectly at ease in the wild, more so than Alex expected from someone who clearly wasn't from Earth. He had seen her move with incredible speed and precision during their brief moments of danger, and now, as they trekked through the woods, he began to notice just how strong she was. She wasn't fragile. She was powerful, capable of so much more than Alex could understand. And yet, she remained by his side, walking beside him as though he were the one who was guiding her through this unknown world. As the day wore on, they found themselves at the edge of a small clearing. The sun was beginning to dip below the trees, casting long shadows over the ground. Alex knew they needed to keep moving, but something in the air made him stop. Mira had stopped too, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. Alex followed, her line of sight, but he saw nothing out of the ordinary. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low. Mira's eyes were intense, searching the horizon. "They're near," she said, her voice barely audible. "I can feel them. They know where we are." Alex's pulse quickened. The thought of being caught sent a cold shiver down his spine. He wanted to grab her hand and run, but the fear of being seen was paralyzing. "What do we do now?" he whispered, barely daring to speak. Mira looked at him, and for the first time there was a look of calm in her eyes, as though she had already accepted that the danger was inevitable. "We fight," she said simply. Alex blinked in surprise. "Fight? How?" Mira's lips curved into a small, confident smile. "I'll show you," she replied. Without another word, she moved swiftly through the trees, her movements fluid and graceful. Alex had no idea what she was planning, but he followed her, unsure of what to expect. As they neared the edge of the clearing, Mira dropped to the ground, crouching low. Alex did the same, instinctively mimicking her. Through the trees, Alex saw what she had been sensing, the glint of metallic shapes moving through the forest. They weren't human, that much was obvious. The creatures, or whatever they were, moved. With precision, their movements coordinated as they searched the area. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he realized how close they were to being discovered. "We need to get out of here," Alex murmured, fear creeping into his voice. Mira shook, her head, her eyes narrowing. "No, we're not running anymore." Her voice was firm, filled with resolve. She was determined. And as Alex looked at her, he felt his own fear start to fade. "I'm with you," he said, his voice steady. "Let's do this." Mira gave a single nod, and without warning, she sprang into action. She moved faster than Alex could follow, her body darting through the trees like a shadow. The aliens, whoever they were, didn't stand a chance. Mira took them down one by one, her skills and speed overwhelming them. Alex stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Mira was incredible. She fought with an elegance and precision he couldn't have imagined. She didn't even seem to break a sweat. Her movements were like a dance, fluid and effortless, taking down each enemy with ease. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last of the attackers was neutralized. Mira stood panting, her eyes scanning the clearing for any more threats. Alex approached her, his mouth dry with amazement. "That was unbelievable," he said, still trying to process what he had just witnessed. Mira looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I told you, I'll protect you." Alex felt a surge of gratitude, but also something else. Respect. Mira wasn't just some helpless alien. She was strong, resilient, and ready to fight for survival. And now Alex realized he wasn't just protecting her. They were in this together. "We make a good team," Alex said, his voice filled with admiration. Mira's smile widened slightly. "Yes, we do." The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Alex and Mira stood at the edge of the small clearing. There, backs pressed against the thick trees. They had just dealt with the threat of the alien pursuers, and for a brief moment, Alex allowed himself to breathe a sigh of relief. But it was only temporary. The danger wasn't over yet. "We can't stay here," Mira said, her voice low but steady. Her sharp eyes scanned the trees, her senses alert to any movement in the distance. The encounter with the attackers had only made her more cautious, more determined to get them out of the woods. But Alex could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. "I know," he replied, his voice strained. "But where do we go now?" Mira took a deep breath, thinking, "There's a safe house not far from here. It's hidden well. If we can make it there, we'll be safe for now." Alex nodded, trying to shake off the sense of dread that lingered in his mind. "Let's go then. How far?" "Not far," Mira answered, already moving forward. "But we need to hurry. They won't stop looking for me. We don't have much time." As they moved through the trees, Alex's mind raced. He couldn't shake the thought that the alien pursuers were getting closer. He had seen them with his own eyes, fast, skilled, and relentless. He wasn't sure how long Mira could keep evading them, especially without help. But Mira seemed confident, her movements swift and calculated. She knew what she was doing. They pushed forward, moving, as quickly and quietly as possible. Alex followed Mira, trying to match her pace. The forest was dense, and the shadows from the trees made it difficult to see clearly. But Alex trusted Mira's instincts. He had to. She was the one leading them now, guiding them through this maze of trees and underbrush. She had been in situations like this before. She knew what it took to survive. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip below the horizon. The air grew colder, and the sound of distant animals filled the silence around them. Alex was exhausted, but he didn't dare stop, not with the enemy still out there. Finally, they reached a small, secluded cabin nestled in a clearing. It was well hidden, almost invisible from the outside. Mira stepped forward and carefully pushed open the door, motioning for Alex to follow. He hesitated for a moment, glancing around, but there was no sign of anyone following them. Still, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling in his gut. Once inside, Mira immediately moved to the small fireplace, starting a fire with practiced ease. Alex sat down on a nearby chair, trying to catch his breath. His heart was still racing from their escape, but at least here, in this small cabin, they had a moment to breathe. This is it, Mira said quietly, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. We'll rest here for now. Alex nodded, but he didn't feel at ease. The cabin felt too still, too quiet. He glanced at Mira, who was standing near the fire, her eyes focused on the flames. He could see the tension in her body, the way her shoulders were rigid as if she were constantly listening for any sound that might signal danger. Mira, you're sure this is safe? Alex asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Mira didn't look at him immediately. She kept her gaze on the fire for a few moments before finally turning to face him. Her expression was serious, her eyes reflecting the weight of everything that had happened. It's safe, for now, she said, her voice low. But it won't be for long. They'll track me here, they always do. Alex could see the frustration in her eyes, the anger she was trying to hide. It was clear that Mira had been running for a long time, and this constant fear of being found was wearing on her. She wasn't just running for her life. She was fighting to stay alive, to keep herself hidden from the enemies who would stop at nothing to capture her. He stood up and walked over to her, his expression softening. We'll keep moving then. We won't stop. I'll help you however I can. Mira gave him a small, tight smile. You're brave, human. But this is more than you think. They won't stop looking for me. They never do. I don't care how dangerous it is, Alex said, his voice steady. I'm not leaving you to face them alone. For a moment, Mira didn't say anything. She just looked at him, her eyes filled with something that Alex couldn't quite read. She seemed to study him, as though trying to decide whether or not to trust his words. Then, without warning, she took a step closer to him. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but sincere. You don't know what that means to me. Alex met her gaze, feeling a surge of warmth in his chest. I'll do whatever it takes, he replied, his voice filled with determination. We're in this together. Mira nodded, her expression softening. But even as she stood there, a look of gratitude in her eyes, Alex could see the doubt still lingering beneath the surface. She was still afraid, and as much as Alex wanted to believe that they could fight this together, a small part of him couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Just as Alex was about to say something, Mira's posture stiffened. She moved swiftly to the window, her eyes narrowing as she peered into the darkness. They're here, she whispered. Alex's heart stopped. He rushed to her side, his eyes darting to the trees outside. And there, in the distance, he saw them. The shadows of figures moving through the trees, closing in on the cabin. The hunters had found them. Mira, Alex breathed, his voice filled with panic. Get ready, Mira said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. They won't go down easily, but neither will we. Alex nodded, his hands trembling as he prepared for whatever was coming next. The fight was far from over, and he knew that this time they would have to stand and fight, or risk being caught. The figures in the distance were getting closer. Alex stood by the window, his heart pounding as he watched the shadows move between the trees. Mira was already preparing herself, her eyes narrowed in concentration as she examined the small cabin. Alex could sense the urgency in her movements, but he also saw something else: determination. She had faced dangers like this before, but now she was no longer alone. She had him, and he was not going to back down. We have to leave now, Mira said, her voice steady but filled with an edge of fear. If they get any closer, they'll find us. We have to move before they get to the cabin. Alex turned away from the window, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of the situation on his shoulders. Mira was counting on him, and he couldn't let her down. He had no weapons, no plan, and no idea what was waiting for them outside. But one thing was clear: if they stayed here, they wouldn't survive. What's the plan? Alex asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Mira moved quickly to the door, her eyes scanning the forest. We'll head east. There's a small town, about 2 days' walk from here. We'll hide there for a while, gather supplies, and figure out what to do next. Alex nodded, already moving toward the small pack of supplies he had gathered earlier. 2 days. That's a long time to be out in the open. I know, Mira replied, her voice soft but firm. But it's our best chance. We need to make it to the town before they catch up to us. If we can reach the people there, they might be able to help us. Alex grabbed his coat, slinging it over his shoulder. Then we leave now. No time to waste. They moved quietly through the cabin, gathering what they could, water, food, and anything useful they might need on their journey. Alex's mind kept drifting back to the figures in the woods. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were closing in on them, that the moment they stepped outside, they would be seen. But Mira was right. They had no other choice. Mira motioned for him to follow as she opened the door and stepped outside. The cold air hit Alex's face, the scent of pine and earth mixing with the sharp scent of the oncoming storm. The forest stretched out before them, dark and silent, but Alex could feel the tension in the air. The ground beneath their feet was soft, damp from the rain, making every step more difficult. Stay close, Mira whispered, her voice barely audible. We need to move fast, but we can't make any noise. They're listening for us. Alex nodded, his heart racing as they moved deeper into the forest. Every step seemed louder than the last, every rustling leaf, every snap of a branch making him jump. Mira was moving ahead of him, her eyes scanning every direction as she led the way through the dense trees. The journey through the woods was slow and tense. Alex's legs ached from the effort, but he pushed on, trying to keep up with Mira. She was so much faster, so much more agile, moving through the forest like a shadow. Alex couldn't help but feel awe at her strength and speed. But there was something else too, a sense of power that he could barely comprehend. Mira wasn't just a survivor. She was something more, something different. As the night fell, the temperature dropped. The darkness seemed to press in on them from every side, but Mira remained calm, her eyes never faltering as she navigated through the trees. Alex struggled to keep up, his breath coming in short bursts, but he didn't complain. He couldn't afford to. They had to keep moving. After several hours, they stopped for a brief rest. Mira crouched low, listening for any sounds of movement in the distance. Alex sat down beside her, trying to catch his breath. His body was sore, but it was the fear that gnawed at him. The fear of being caught, of not making it to safety. He looked at Mira, who seemed to be lost. In thought, her face shadowed in the dim light. Do you think we'll make it? Alex asked quietly. Mira didn't look at him immediately. She simply stared into the darkness, her expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, she spoke. I don't know, but I won't stop trying, and neither should you. Her words hit Alex harder than he expected. He had been so focused on the fear of being caught that he had forgotten about the hope they still had. They had a chance, even if it seemed small. They had each other, and that was something he had to hold on to. Mira stood up, motioning for Alex to follow. We can't stay here for long. We need to move again. The pursuers will be closer by morning. Alex nodded, pushing himself to his feet. He was tired, hungry, and scared, but he wasn't about to give up. Not when he had made a promise to Mira. He would protect her no matter what it took. As they continued on their journey, the forest grew denser, the path harder to navigate. The sound of rushing water reached Alex's ears, and he looked ahead to see a small stream cutting through the forest. Mira stopped, kneeling beside the water to refill their bottles. We can't let our guard down yet, she said, glancing around. The stream will help cover our tracks, but it also means we'll be exposed. We have to keep moving quickly. Alex watched Mira, her focus sharp as she worked, and he couldn't help but admire her. She was so strong, so capable, but even she couldn't do this alone. He had to be her partner in this fight. They were in this together, and he would stand by her side, no matter what came next. As the night dragged on, Alex's mind kept racing. The weight of their journey, the danger they faced, and the unknown threats lurking in the darkness all pressed down on him. But through it all, he had one clear thought. They had to make it. For both of them. And so they continued on through the night, through the forest, their only hope to make it to the town and find safety. Together they were stronger than they had been alone. and as long as they had each other, they could survive, whatever came next. The journey had taken longer than Alex had anticipated. After traveling through the dense forest for hours and navigating the rough terrain, the sun had started to rise, casting a pale light over the landscape. The sky was streaked with soft oranges and pinks as they continued on, the town still a distance away. But Alex could feel the end of their trek drawing near, and with it a sense of both relief and uncertainty. Mira had led the way, unwavering in her determination. She moved with the ease and confidence of someone who had spent years surviving in hostile environments. Alex struggled to keep up, but he kept his focus on her every move, trusting her instincts. There was something calming about her presence, and despite the danger that still hovered over them, Alex couldn't help but feel that they were going to make it. After a few more hours of walking, Mira stopped abruptly, her hand raised to signal for Alex to hold back. She crouched low, peering through the trees. Alex did the same, his heart racing as he tried to understand what had caught her attention. "I can hear them," Mira whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're not far." Alex's breath hitched, and his thoughts began to race. The last thing they needed was to be caught this close to safety. "How many?" he asked, his voice strained. Mira stayed still for a moment, listening carefully. "I don't know yet, but they're getting closer." Alex's mind whirled. He looked around the dense forest, searching for a way to avoid the pursuers. They couldn't risk being found so close to the town. They had come too far to fail now. "Can we make it to the town without being seen?" Alex asked, his voice urgent. Mira didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be considering the options, weighing their chances. Finally, she spoke. "If we move quickly and stay hidden, yes, but we can't afford to stop." Without another word, she motioned for Alex to follow. They began to move once again, staying low and keeping to the shadows of the trees. The sound of the pursuers grew louder, but the forest seemed to be working in their favor. The thick canopy above kept them hidden from view, and the underbrush was thick enough to hide their footsteps. As they moved silently through the woods, Alex's heart raced. His muscles ached from the long journey, and his mind kept returning to the threat that still loomed over them. The thought of being caught, of losing Mira, was something he couldn't even begin to imagine. He had to get her to safety. Finally, after what felt like hours of tense silence, they reached the edge of the forest. The town lay just beyond, the outlines of buildings barely visible in the distance. They were close now. Alex could feel a flicker of hope rising in his chest, but he knew they couldn't stop. Not yet. Mira glanced over her shoulder, then quickly moved forward, signaling Alex to follow. They sprinted the last few hundred yards, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the soft ground. As they reached the first row of buildings, Mira stopped, her eyes scanning the streets for any signs of danger. "This way," she whispered, motioning toward an alley between two buildings. They ducked into the alley, their hearts pounding with the effort of their sprint. Alex tried to steady his breath, his pulse still racing. They had made it. They were finally in the town. But the relief was short-lived. Mira was still tense, her eyes constantly darting around, checking every corner, every shadow. She was on high alert, as if the danger wasn't over yet. "We need to find somewhere to hide," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "They will be looking for us. It's only a matter of time before they realize we've come here." Alex nodded, but he didn't know where to go. He wasn't familiar with the town, and Mira didn't seem to have a specific destination in mind. He could feel the weight of their situation bearing down on him again, but he couldn't let that stop him. They moved quickly through the streets, staying close to the walls and avoiding open areas. Alex kept his eyes on Mira, following her lead. She knew what she was doing, and Alex was trusting her completely. For the first time, he realized how much he had come to rely on her. They had made it this far because of her strength, her guidance, and her ability to survive. Finally, they came to a small, unassuming building tucked away at the end of a narrow street. Mira stopped in front of it, glancing around to make sure they weren't being followed. Then, without a word, She pushed open the door and stepped inside. Alex followed her, closing the door behind him as quietly as possible. Inside, the building was dimly lit, with a few pieces of furniture scattered around. It looked like an old storage facility or perhaps a small shop that had long since been abandoned. But to Alex, it didn't matter. This was the first safe place they had found since leaving the cabin. Mira moved to the back of the building, her eyes scanning the area. "We can rest here for a while," she said, her voice softer now. "At least until we figure out what to do next." Alex nodded, feeling the exhaustion catch up to him. His legs were sore, his body worn from the journey. But they had made it. They were safe, for now. And for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to relax, even just for a moment. "We made it," Alex said quietly, his voice filled with relief. Mira turned to face him, her expression softer than it had been in days. She smiled just a little before replying, "We did, and we'll keep going. Together." In that moment, Alex realized something important. They had made it this far, and they could make it further. They had faced impossible odds, but they had survived. And with Mira by his side, Alex felt like anything was possible. They had each other, and that was enough to keep moving forward. Their journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Alex felt like they had a future, one that they could shape together.